Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Of course, only drop a like if you feel this video is genuinely deserving of it. Subscribing, commenting, sharing the video around, all of that is very much appreciated as well. I do read all of my comments. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy these horror stories with no mid-roll ads, except for the one right after this intro. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Back in 2018, I was in a difficult position. I'd lost my job working security for a local firm, and was looking for something on short notice. Add to that, I was in a difficult situation with my then girlfriend. We were on a sort of pause. It was a strange time. In short, I was looking for a job and I found one. There's this charity, which I won't name, that handles distribution of something called the Little Miracle Chest. These have been around since the 80s, but they're very limited in scope. It's these colorful toy boxes that are sent out to first-time parents, mostly in the southern East Coast states. They usually contain a couple of goodies, some parental advice books, a Bible, and a couple other things. It's been around for a while, but I don't think a lot of people talk about it. I read online that a local chapter handling the Little Miracle chests needed permanent warehouse security, so I applied. I had one of these chests as a kid, and honestly I loved it. I thought it was a nice callback, especially at a time when I needed stability. For the sake of brevity, I'll just say this up front. I've changed a couple of names around, including my own, just to make sure my position and the location stays anonymous. I met with a guy, let's call him Jonah. Friendliest guy you'll ever meet. Early 50s, honest living kind of guy if you could look past the creepy horn-rimmed glasses. He looked like a cool dad who'd stepped out of a 70s commercial. Firm handshake, calming voice. I met him just outside the warehouse, and he had the most starched white shirt I'd ever seen. "Jonah," he said, shaking my hand. "And you must be Henry." "You got that right. Glad to be here." "It's like I know you already. Do you want the tour?" "Gotta admit," I said, "I'm a bit nervous about the interview." "Interview?" Jonah laughed. "My friend, as far as I'm concerned, the job is yours. We got your application, is all. You fit the bill just fine." "You sure?" I asked. "I figured you'd need some, I don't know, clarity." "I got a good eye for people," smiled Jonah. "But I suppose I have one question that needs answering, if you're so inclined." "Go right ahead." Jonah put a hand up to shield his eyes from the July sun. The guy was clearly an outdoorsy type, being tanned from head to toe. "Do you consider yourself a nurturing man?" he asked. It was a perfectly fair question, but it was difficult to answer. I had this girlfriend, Jill, who I'd been seeing for about 8 months. We got along great and had been talking about moving in together when she revealed something. She had a kid. I had no idea. It had been this thing she hadn't intended to hide. It just ended up that way. We got along so well, and by the time she wanted to tell me, it had gotten strange to bring it up. I don't think it was nefarious, but it became this strange sticking point in our story. 8 months, and I'd never once heard she had a 5-year-old boy at home. At that point, I didn't know if things were complicated because I didn't want to be a stepdad, or because she'd lied to me. So when Jonah asked me if I was a nurturing man, that's where my thoughts brought me. I zoned out a little and answered as well as I could. "I'd like to think I am," I said, "but I don't know. Hard to tell." "Well, at least you're honest," smiled Jonah. "That makes up for a lot." With that, he gave me a tour of the warehouse. row after row of little miracle chests, all wrapped in cellophane and ready to be shipped out. The little miracle chests are about 4 feet long, 3 feet wide, and has a rounded treasure chest kind of lid. The thing is made of some solid kind of wood, and has these metal handles bolted to the side. It's heavy, at least 30 pounds. On the side, you get all kinds of classic Americana printed. Boys and girls playing in the sun, a white church, green grass, a rainbow, happy couples leaning on one another, but also a few of adventurous motifs, like lions being ridden by young boys, or little girls feeding unicorns with blue sunflower seeds. It's probably the most sugar-coated wholesome thing you'll ever see, if you haven't seen one already. Before we could enter, Jonah gave me a tap on the back. These things come straight from the printer, so we have these industrial fans going in there to keep the prints from peeling until they settle, so it's loud in there. Alright. So we got these headphones, noise cancelling and all. Whenever you're in the main hall, you need these on at all times, or you'll hurt your hearing. We can't be held liable for that, Henry. We don't got that kind of money. Fair enough. He gave me the headphones and showed me around the warehouse. There was a definite chemical in the air. It was a prickly smell, like old lime and deep ammonia. It stuck with you immediately. Jonah showed me around the main hall, the loading dock, and the various entryways to keep an eye on. He pointed out a few cameras, all the light sources, and where the emergency buttons were in case of a fire or serious accident. Once we got out of the warehouse, we put away the headphones and put them in a locker. There was this small adjoining office with 2 desks, and an honest-to-God fax machine. Jonah explained a couple of details I needed to keep in mind. We got this place pretty cheap because the ground rests on aquifer, he explained. That's been shifting slightly over the years, causing a lot of incline. We've looked into contractors to help us compensate, but it's a steep bill. Long story short, Henry, you need to check to make sure none of the chests tumble off the shelves. We don't want them to break. Not one. Is that why you wrap them up like that? I asked. For traction? Traction and to keep the fumes in. You know. They're straight from the printer. We don't want you to get a wheezy lung. We want you around for a while. I appreciate that. Anything else I ought to know? Well, look at you, smiled Jonah, giving me a firm pat on the shoulder. Being proactive. I knew I picked the right guy. Well, since you asked, there's one last thing. He sat down on one of the desks, trying to look like a cool substitute teacher. I bet that move worked better on the younger folks. Well, 2 things, he admitted. 1, don't use the freezer. We've had to throw out a bunch of stuff because of it. And 2, do you know our motto? The motto? Yeah, the little miracle motto. Do you know it? You used to have one as a kid, right? And of course I knew it. It was written on the inside of the lid, so you saw it every time you opened it. God loves all his little miracles, I said. That's the motto. Hot diggity dog, Henry. I knew you were the perfect guy. He gave me another firm clap on the shoulder. A couple of signed papers later, and I was officially hired. There were a couple more things to keep track of, like where we stored keys, what to do at certain times, and how many hours of the day I had to stick around. I had an alternating schedule with a 3-week rotation. The pay was decent, but I had to scale back on a couple of things on account of only working 4 days out of the week. The extra pay for working the occasional weekend and night shift were more than enough to make up for it. All in all, I was only down about $100 or so from my last job, and this was both more stable and had better hours. Jonah was always around, mostly in the office. I saw him try to get that stupid freezer to work a couple of times, but they gave up and started using it for storage. Mostly charity merch like hats and cheap jackets. The people who worked there struck me as harmless, but socially awkward. They would bring in the occasional plate of cookies or wish me a blessed afternoon, but they would keep to themselves and give me a curious side eye. Night shifts were a whole different thing. The little miracle chests look a bit strange in the dark. You have to consider, the one I used to have was beat up and torn at the edges. These things were fresh from the printer. They looked nothing like my old thing. It had been thrown out somewhere around my later high school years. I grew up in a troubled home. I didn't know it was a troubled home back then, but it was. I was an only child, and my parents were constantly complaining about their financials. Whenever the two of them were in the same room for more than an hour, they'd yell. There was always something. The broken lawnmower, the extra shift that ruined our weekend plans, the cheap muffler, that strange noise from the shower drain. There was always something, and someone had something to say about it, and they had to say it loudly. I used to get so tired of it that I'd lay under my bed with a pillow over my head, trying to drown the sound out. That is until I realized that the little miracle chest we had was mostly soundproof. I'd put blankets and pillows in there and make it my happy place. I would spend a lot of weekends there with a flashlight tucked under my chin, reading or playing, and whenever I ran out of batteries, I'd imagine what was written on the page and just whisper it into the dark. Or I could be an astronaut for a while, floating through space. Or maybe I was a spy, hidden in the trunk of a villain's car. It sounds sad, but I never knew it was. I loved that darkness. It was my own, and no one could take it from me. I'd whisper my little truths into the void, and I felt like it understood me, like it was a friend. I could imagine it saying, "You're our little miracle, Henry, and we'll always be here for you." And every time I looked up, there was that motto, "God loves all his little miracles." The job itself wasn't that demanding. I'd help out with the occasional loading at the dock, and I'd keep the place shut down and safe in the evenings. Most of the time I was walking around the warehouse, listening to a podcast or an audiobook. The headphones Jonah gave me were these amazing $400 industrial things that worked as radio, communication, and media player, and he was perfectly fine with me listening to something while on my own. For all his quirks, Jonah was probably the most chill boss I'd ever had. There were a couple of times I had to step in. A couple of chests had slid a bit too far, and I'd have to wrap them up in more cellophane and put them back. Other times, the smell would get so strong that I had to step out for a while. I'd get chills from the overhead fans, and there was always something sticky to get your shoe stuck on, so it wasn't perfect, but what job is? But my trouble started for real when I started using glasses. I'd been riddled with headaches for a week, and Jonah gave me a day off to check with my optician. Turns out I needed glasses. It was a pain to get used to, but even more of a pain to wear them underneath the headphones. I'd get this chafing around the edges of my ears from the constant pressure. After a while, I decided to take a break from the headphones, if only for a while, just to give my ears some time to rest. That's when I noticed something peculiar. The industrial fans weren't really that loud, barely even a hum. I asked Jonah about it, but he insisted I wear the headphones, or at least earplugs. "It's an insurance thing," he argued. "It's really important. Please take this serious, Henry." I didn't want to lie to him, but I did. Whenever no one was around, I'd put away the headphones. I'd still keep them around my neck if I needed to put them back on, but I'd keep them off most of the time. But that put another thought in my head. What about the floor tilt? Was that really a thing? The fans weren't so bad, so maybe this wasn't either. There was this water level tool in the office. I borrowed it from Jonah's desk and went into the warehouse. I checked the warehouse shelves one by one. None of them were tilted, or at an angle. They were all perfectly straight. I had the day shift the following afternoon. There was a short moment before my lunch break where there was just me and Jonah in the office. He'd kick his feet up on a chair and bask in the heat like a lizard. I'd only been with Little Miracles for a few weeks, but I'd already grown to enjoy the job. Asking questions about it felt shaky. Jonah looked up at me with a curious expression. "I got a couple of questions about the warehouse," I said. "A couple of things ain't adding up, and I need some clarity." "Well, Henry, that's what the good book is for," he smiled. "But I guess I could clear up some of the smaller stuff." "Let's start with the headphones," I continued. "The fans are barely audible. There's no way they could cause any kind of hearing damage." Jonah nodded with a slightly furrowed brow. "All right," he said. "Go on." "And the shelves. You said the floor was crooked, and that the chests kept sliding. I checked the floor, and it ain't crooked. Shelves ain't either." "So what are you asking me, Henry? What's this adding up to?" "There's something you're not telling me. If we're gonna be a team, I need to know what's going on." Jonah got up from his chair and patted me on the shoulder. His frown softened into a trained, quiet smile. He held his hand out, urging me to follow him into the warehouse. We wandered over to the closest chest, and Jonah gently placed it on the floor. He unwrapped the cellophane, talking to me as it came undone. The smell of the paint unfurled like a carpet, spilling over my senses. The ammonia could have choked me, but it was the old lime smell that stuck around the longest. "I can't tell you why they slide off the shelves," Jonah said. "It's just something we have to compensate for." He tapped the chest and opened it, showing me the simple wooden interior. It was empty, with the motto printed on the inside of the lid. "The headphones are a courtesy," Jonah sighed. "A couple of folks feel bad about asking if they can play music or listen to something while they're out there by their lonesome. We figure giving a free pass makes the time go a little faster. And, well, we already bought the things." "Jonah, that can't be it. That can't be all there is." He closed the lid and wrapped the chest back up. "Here's God's honest truth," he said. "This entire organization is here to care for the good Lord's little miracles. And if we do what's expected of us, that's what we'll do." There wasn't a hint of a lie. I don't know what I expected. The chests were empty, and while the explanations were weak, they were at least plausible. It was enough to keep my mouth shut for a little longer. "If there's anything else, you know where to find me," he said. "Stick to the script and you'll do fine." And for some time, I did just that. I patrolled those halls day and night, making sure the chests didn't slide off the shelves. I listened to my audiobooks, helped load the trucks, wrapped the chests in cellophane, and that was all there was to it. I had the thought that maybe Jonah had picked a specific chest to open, so at times, I'd open others just to check, but they were always empty. For a full month I didn't think much of it. That is, until one particular night. I didn't use my headphones that evening. My glasses were chafing again. I'd gotten a text from Jill earlier that night, and I kept pacing back and forth trying to figure out what to respond. Hell, maybe I shouldn't respond at all. The message was part apology, part explanation, and a reminder that despite it all, she missed me. Part of me wanted to say I missed her back. Another part wanted to walk away. Jonah's question still stuck with me. Am I a nurturing man? As I paced, I noticed one of the chests having slid a little further than usual. A full corner of the chest was hanging off the edge of the shelf. I put my phone away, slid the chest back in place, and stepped back. As I did, I heard something. It was low, like a mumble from behind a pane of glass. "Thank you." I looked back at the chest. I stared at it, dumbfounded. "You're welcome?" There was no response. And of course there wasn't. How could there be? It might have been the wind, but a part of me knew it wasn't. That noise brought me back to those childhood summers. hidden away in the safety of my little miracle chest, while my parents threw dinner plates and novelty mugs. In the safety of that chest, when I whispered something, I'd imagined someone listening, and that someone would sometimes whisper back. And what I heard in that warehouse was exactly like what I'd imagined that voice to sound like. From that point on, I started looking at the little miracle chests a bit different. I began questioning whether they were affecting me, or I was affecting myself. It had been such a small sound, barely audible, a whisper of a thank you. I could have misheard. I must have. The only other option was nonsensical. Chests can't talk, and I knew for a fact that these were empty. But I couldn't help it. During those long hours of the night, I had to look a little closer, listen a little longer, and when I couldn't convince myself to stop, I tried to test them, challenge them even. I'd whisper at them, knock on the lid, or pick up and shake them a bit. Of course, nothing happened, but every now and then I'd see one of them twitch or rattle. Was it one particular chest that moved, or was it all of them? One night I didn't even bother to try. I just picked a chest and stared at it, waiting for it to move. I'd looked at it for so long that the image sort of blurred, like when you hear a word too many times and it starts to sound like a noise. Then, there it was. A nudge. Just a little, but clear as day. I rushed it, tore away the cellophane and opened it, and of course it was empty, and I'd accidentally ripped off part of the print. Just a corner, where the lion was. I thought about lying to Jonah, but I knew better. Not only did he deserve the truth, but there were cameras to tell the full story. Not that I didn't think he'd believe me, but because it didn't matter. No matter if the chest moved or not, I'd messed up. I met Jonah in the parking lot on the way to the office. He carried a much too formal suitcase and a copy of today's paper. I caught up and told him flat out what I'd seen, the moving chest and the subsequent unwrapping. Jonah nodded, then wielded his newspaper like a judge's gavel. "Henry," he said, "you are still the perfect man for the job. I know you are, and I want to help you." "Then tell me what's going on," I begged. "Tell me I'm not crazy." "How about this?" he said. "You heard about the storm?" It had been the talk of the week, a storm brewing over for the weekend. With the brunt of it hitting later that evening, the sky had already darkened. We had a last-minute cancellation, and I got no one to help. If you can keep things in check this one night, I'll see what I can do. "Can do about what?" I asked. "What can you do?" "Henry, please," he said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "I'll see what I can do." I agreed. Things were gonna be a bit different that evening. I was the only one on site, and there'd be no one to call for backup. That and the storm was guaranteed trouble. We had to close the fans and lock down the shelves with plastic straps. And because the fans weren't running, I'd have to wear a mask with a gas filter, just in case the fumes got too intense. I was gonna have to make sure everything was secure, which would be an effort and a half. Not even an hour into my shift, I started getting warnings about rolling blackouts in the area due to fallen trees cutting the power lines. 30 minutes later, and it reached me. The entire warehouse turned dark with a sudden click. The silence was so palpable that I could hear my heartbeat. It's surprising how many noises are around you when it's quiet. You kinda don't notice unless the power is gone. As the power went out, I could hear the wind picking up. It was pushing into our ventilation, making the warehouse fan squeak in protest. And with a first lightning strike, I heard the shelves rattle, not because the ground shook, but because they suddenly moved. I checked the straps on the shelves with a flashlight, trying to figure out what had made them move. I noticed a particular chest on the mid-level that had slipped a bit, and I pushed it back in line. That was the one to keep an eye on, but As the second lightning strike collapsed into the woods outside, the shelves rattled again, and when thunder started to roll, I looked up. It wasn't just one peculiar chest. They were all moving. Some of them were actively fighting against the protective straps. Others seemed to shake like a leaf in the wind. It's like something had kicked them, forced them into action. A couple of lids flipped up, revealing the empty insides. I could hear the cellophane stretch and strain against some unseen force pushing the chests every which way. Then voices. "What's happening? Who's there? Is it danger?" I tried my best, I really did. I tried to ignore the movement and the whispers. I tried keeping them all still and secure, but one strap on the far end of the warehouse came undone, and one persistent gust of wind made the entire thing lean. I could see that it was about to fall long before I got there. It crashed into another shelf who bore the brunt of the weight, and luckily, it held. But one chest on the far end got loose. It collapsed to the floor and splintered on the concrete. Something leaked out of it. It looked like a water-oil mixture, and it had this intense smell of old fruit. I grabbed what remained of the lid and moved it, only to see a small, translucent hand sticking out, no bigger than my thumb. Little claws curled around the fingertips. It was so white I could see its veins, where a pulse ought to twitch, but it didn't. It lay still. I let the lid go and backed away. "We die," a chest whispered. "We're dying," said another. "Mother, call for Mother. Mother." They hissed and rattled, every chest on every shelf, and as the hissing got louder, it turned into a wail, a cry for help, drowning into the raging storm. I backed away, not knowing what to do. A couple of straps were coming undone. Some shelves were swaying in the wind, and right there on the floor lay that splintered chest like a broken egg. "I'm trying to help," I called out. "I can help. Just please stop and I'll help." "The Death Man," a chest hissed. "Fear the Death Man. Mother, Mother." The calls got louder. A chant for Mother, for something to come help them, to deal with the Death Man. I couldn't stay. Defying the storm, I rushed out of the warehouse and into the parking lot. I was drenched in seconds as the rain fell sideways, but I much preferred the howling storm to whatever was happening on those shelves. I couldn't believe it. I ran from my car. I had to call Jonah. I'd gotten about 30 feet when I noticed something on the road ahead. It looked like an oncoming flash flood. Mud and trees and bushes being swept up into a big pile, roiling its way across the road. It was far off, but there was something about it. It looked out of place. I stopped for a second to take a closer look. It had eyes. It wasn't oozing across the road. It was crawling like a massive reptile. I'd mistaken its scales for tree bark. It was a creature, an unreal reptilian thing, and it was coming straight for me. And now that I looked at it, it was fast. I never made it to my car. I turned back to the warehouse. I sprinted as fast as my legs would allow and slammed the door shut behind me. 2 seconds later, the door imploded with a metallic twang, hitting me in the shin bone and sending me sprawling to the floor. "Mother," the chests cried. "Mother comes. Mother saves. Mother eats the Death Man. Eat the Death Man." Something groaned. It sounded like a tree bending in the wind, but there was a tune to it, and it repeated like the croak of an angry frog. The living mudslide reached into the warehouse, only to reveal a 5-clawed forelimb, each claw the size of my leg. It cracked the floor like wet sand. Then, a roar. The air rippled. and the pressure made my ears pop long before I even heard it sound. It was part hiss, part croak, and part shriek, all wrapped up into one furious bellow that rattled the windows. I got back up on my feet, wobbling from the gash in my leg just as the thing reached the loading bay doors. Those are solid metal. I thought they'd hold for a while, but they bent wide open with a little effort. It was like watching a rabid dog tear into a pillow fort. The storm spilled onto the warehouse floor. The winds shook the shelves as the creature stopped in front of the broken chest. A split white tongue tasted the air, each segment the size of a grown man's thigh. It poked around the splinters and looked up with a pupil the size of a bowling ball. "Kill the death man," one demanded. Kill him now. Mother, mother." A bellow rolled out of that thing like a revving engine. I saw claws sink into the concrete as it dragged itself forward, heading my way. I hobbled into the main office. I could hear that thing thrashing around, trying to follow me. For a second it stopped. I thought maybe the door was too small for it. Then I heard a scratching noise, like construction tools being dragged across the wall. It was gonna break the entire room. I didn't know where to go, or what to do. I could make a run for it, but that thing would be on me in seconds out in the open. I had to keep stalling it, but I didn't know how. It was protecting something young and small, hidden within the chests. "I don't know what to do," I gasped. "I don't know what to do." I thought about Jill and not seeing her again, about never answering her last text, only for her to see my name in the obituaries. Then, a chime, a ringtone. Jonah had an extra phone in his top desk drawer, a cheap, disposable flip phone, and it was ringing. I pulled it out and answered, gasping for air as my eyes flicked back and forth. Jonah's voice came through from the other side. "Henry," he said, "I'm sorry it came to this." "What is this?" I gasped. "What do I do?" "Where do we go when we're scared, Henry? Where are we safe?" "That's what I'm asking," I yelled back. "What do I do?" "Think, Henry. Where are you safe?" I blinked. My mind snapped to attention, and I looked around the room, and there by the window was the broken freezer. I climbed into it, hiding beneath a pile of merchandise while the storm raged outside. I could hear the wall give way to tooth and claw as a primal bellow rattled the confines of the freezer. I just lay there in the dark, clutching the phone like my childhood flashlight. I calmed my breathing, listening to Jonah's voice. "Just like back in the day," he said. "What are you talking about?" Another bellow. Something bumped the freezer, making it wobble, but it didn't tip over. "She's upset with you," Jonah said. "She hasn't been socialized like the others." I didn't say anything. I just held the phone tight, closed my eyes, and tried to breathe. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it'd be this bad. I just thought they'd get a little scared from the thunder, maybe show you something, but..." Another lightning strike in the distance. Thunder roared across the sky, and the creature outside thrashed across the room, trampling the desks and breaking the cheap metal chairs. I could hear a bookshelf crash, and seconds later something smacked into the freezer. It fell over. The freezer collapsed to the side, but the lid stayed on. I had my breath knocked out of me with a violent thud, but I stifled my wheezing behind a handful of shirts. "Stay still," Jonah whispered. "Do nothing." I heard massive lips smacking as something wet dragged across the freezer like sandpaper. "She doesn't know you're a nurturing man," Jonah said. "She's mourning." I thought about Jill, and with death staring me in the face, I knew the answer to the question Jonah had asked me on the first day. I was a nurturing man. I had been all along, and if I could get out of there in one piece, I'd show them. I kept my eyes closed just like I'd done as a child. I'd pretend the world was different as chaos reigned outside, that they were play fighting or throwing pies like circus clowns. I thought back on those moments in the dark where I'd been an astronaut, ready to set off to distant planets, or make friends with alien life, or the moments when I'd read aloud from some comic book I'd bought with my monthly allowance. A white tongue slipped through the lid of the freezer, tasting the air. A waft of warm, swamp breath swept over me as the creature snorted, looking for my scent. But that freezer smelled more like Jonah than me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'm sorry." "I know," Jonah whispered back. "You're still God's little miracle, Henry. We both are." Another low, rumbling bellowing. This one rippled through my body, as if softening me up for a bite. The tongue protruded again, missing the sweet spot of my head by mere inches. Then it stepped back. It dragged itself across the floor, pulling half the office along in a sudden U-turn. Order slips and receipts stuck to its scales, whipping around in the wind. Debris from broken desks and flattened chairs clung to it, floating along like a natural disaster. I lay there, tucked among the battered merchandise, listening to the howling storm. The worst had passed, and the warehouse chests were quiet. "I'm so proud of you," Jonah sighed. "So proud of what you've become." And I would stay there until dawn, with Jonah, waiting for the wind to stop yelling. Most of the damage was covered by insurance. This part of the county was apparently prone to floods, it seemed, which was one of the reasons it was so cheap. Of course, there was no flood, but I got the sense that they knew that. I met Jonah a couple days later on a park bench not too far from the warehouse. He was having yogurt and brought a thermos of piping hot coffee. We hadn't spoken since that night, but he seemed just as cheery as always. I wasn't. "I need to know what that is," I said. "All of this." He looked up at me, then back down at his yogurt. "Mango flavor." "I never lied to you," he said. "The Tapix is God's little miracle. We just make sure they grow up to be good. They need to socialize, to listen." "So you send them out to children? You hide them in chests and just let them go?" "It works," he said. "We rarely have a problem." "And what are they?" "In the wild, they're terrifying." Jonah shuddered. "But it's like with dogs. They can be your best friend, or roam in packs looking for prey." "So that big thing was a wild one?" "Not wild one," he corrected. "A poorly socialized one." "Then what do the good ones look like?" Jonah finished his yogurt, putting the little plastic spoon down. He wiped his lips and rubbed the tips of his fingers together, making a strange sound. His fingertips were solid, like sanded down bone. "They can look like a good friend," Jonah said. "A kind uncle, a goofy aunt, or a friendly boss who don't ask too many questions. Someone who knows you very well." I looked at him, past the horn-rimmed glasses and the calming smile. There was a tint to his eyes that I hadn't seen before, and a slight protrusion along his spine. "It's not without purpose, Henry," he said. "We're all just trying to be better people." He got up and stretched a little, then let his demeanor sink back into a familiar expression. "See you Monday?" he asked. "For the cleanup." I got up, looked him over, and shook his hand. "See you Monday." It's been a few years since then. The first thing I did after that meeting was call Jill. It didn't take long for us to reconnect. She gave me every opportunity to back out, but I kept at it. And beyond all my insecurities and questions and worries was a life of calm and warmth, one that I could nurture into something beautiful, a place with bedtime reading and early morning car karaoke. You might be surprised to know that I still work with Little Miracles. We got one of the chests at home. The creature that lived in it slipped out last summer, having grown too large to stay in the double bottom floor. I don't consider these things a threat any more than I do a stray dog or an outdoors cat. I get it now. I get how they work. And I don't have to wear any headphones at work. They don't mind me hearing the voices. Jonah has never said it out loud, but I think he and I both know where we first met. He's been with me for a long time, all the way back to when I read books by flashlight. Thanks to him, I guess someone listened to all those times when I whispered into the dark. It's a good reminder that God loves all his little miracles. And maybe we should too. I've been thinking a lot about what I went through that night a couple of years back. I've never had the chance to process it. I think when you go through something traumatic or unusual, you compartmentalize it to the point where it feels like it happened to somebody else. That's what it feels like to me. Back when I was living in a suburb near Pittsburgh, I was making ends meet, but margins were slim and the notion of owning my own house felt like a dream at best. I'd been dating a girl for 2 years, looking for the perfect time to propose, but I just couldn't find the right time and place. But my fortunes were about to change. I got offered a promotion at my job. I'd be a shift manager at a large chemical plant in a couple of weeks. But even better, I got an email about something that might be the perfect time and place for me to finally propose. I was subscribed to a newsletter for a particular singer/songwriter that my girlfriend and I both enjoyed. The first thing we'd ever bonded over was music. There was a promotional campaign where there would be a sneak release of tickets to an upcoming tour, and the first 30 in line would be offered backstage passes. I couldn't imagine a better place to pop the question. Maybe I could get a chance to do it on stage if I asked nicely, but it had to be a surprise, so I kept it to myself. I made up an excuse about going to see my brother and packed a camp-out kit to get in line well and early. The newsletter recommended all of those interested to be in line at least 24 hours ahead of the ticket release. Please be patient and understanding, the email read, and please wait in line. I drove out there early Saturday morning. They'd arranged it as a sort of pop-up store. It was gonna have all kinds of merch, and by opening day, there'd be plenty of people dropping by to get ordinary tickets. But I'd be one of those 30 who got the good ones, come hell or high water. It was awkward getting there, though. They'd shut down 3 of the roads for maintenance, making the zigzag between cones and waiting for traffic in opposing lanes to take a turn. There was an apartment complex nearby, but that had been tented up for fumigation. A couple of nearby stores were shut down after health inspections. All in all, it was just bad timing, and there would be no comforts. But I got a bunch of gear packed. I'd be fine. I had an audiobook, some TV shows, and a lawn chair with a slot for an attachable umbrella. I could sit out there for days if need be. As with most pop-up events, there was no big sign, and the location was closed with metal shutters out front. The only thing that showed that this was the place was a discreet little poster on the side of the door that read, "You made it." The newsletter had mentioned that particular poster. It was all designed in a way to make the release feel exclusive. I got there about 23 hours early, and my heart sank. There were already people in line. Luckily, I only counted 27, but for a short moment I was ready to throw in the towel. I got to the back of the line, did a second and third count, and breathed a sigh of relief. As long as no one cut in line, I was in the green. So I set up my chair, attached an umbrella to my chair, and got started on the first season of Monk. After a couple of hours, the line had grown to about 50 people before slowing down. Maybe those in the back were hoping people up front would either drop out, or maybe they hoped there'd be extra tickets. The email had mentioned that there might be a couple of extras, but it couldn't be guaranteed. But I was still in the green, so I didn't have to worry all that much. It wasn't an unpleasant place to stay. The building was facing away from the sun, and there wasn't any traffic nearby because all the maintenance. I think the crews had stopped working for the weekend, because there was little to no machine noise. I didn't hear a single jackhammer or concrete mixer, just the ambience of the city and the murmur of the people in line. There was a bit of a tussle up front. This one woman was getting up and talking to people. She was hard to miss. She had this neon green band shirt and blue-colored hair. You could see her from a mile away. She went down the line asking if anyone had any antihistamines. Allergy pills. She was having some sort of reaction. Turns out no one had any, so she had to head off to find some. There was a drugstore a couple of blocks away, and the guy next to her promised she could keep her spot. So she walked away, thanking those around her for being so understanding. Thing is, she never came back. Hours later, her spot was still vacant. By dinner time, I kicked up a conversation with a guy next to me. He'd arrived just after I did, so he was still among the first 30. His name was Rodney, and he had this lean metalhead kind of build, arms covered in tattoos, and those kinds of pants with zippers that you can turn into shorts. It didn't look like his kind of venue. "I'm surprising my girl," Rodney smiled. "She loves this stuff." "Same here," I said. I think I might pop the question. "Congrats, love to see it." He offered me a Coke and I took it. He hadn't prepared himself quite like I had, so I offered him a pad to watch some shows while I listened to my audiobook. We shared a couple of stories, some snacks, and added one another to our socials. I chomped down on a cold burrito for dinner and took a nap. Rodney was on his phone talking to a friend for a bit. The people ahead of me were having a conversation of their own, and I only caught parts of it. They were discussing if there were 30 available tickets in total, or if there were more tickets given out to the first 30 people. Was there only one ticket per person? Because if all in line wanted 2 or more, that'd be over 60 in total. The email hadn't specified it, so they were a bit worried. I had no idea, but there was no point in arguing about it. We'd see in about a day. There was this one guy who was a couple of spots ahead of me that had to step out of line. He had a friend coming by to drop off some stuff, so he asked if they could hold his spot for a bit. It'd just be a couple of minutes. I saw him disappear around the corner, doing that "I'm in a bit of a hurry" kind of jog that polite people do. A couple of minutes passed, then half an hour. After a full hour, he still wasn't back. "Isn't that strange?" I said to Rodney. "2 people have gone to get something, and none came back." "Sure, yeah, strange," he nodded. "But some people just say those things to get an excuse to leave. It's embarrassing to say you're bored, you know?" "I guess. It's just strange." "I work at the hospital," he said. "As an anesthesiologist, I know what people who crack under pressure looks like. They always shuffle away with a convenient excuse." "You sure that's it?" I asked. "Nah, but I got no other explanation." "Fair enough." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sounds of the city lowered to a mumble. Cars gave way to people walking their dogs, and in this particular neighborhood, there was a lot of those. There were a couple more people who got out of line and walked away, not to return. We were still well over 40 though, but I think some got cold feet as the city got dark. A couple of light posts from a nearby street cast long shadows across the pavement. I was having a nap when Rodney poked me. He looked confused. Some folks in the back are saying we're in the wrong line. They're opening some name brand store. There ain't no ticket sales. You're kidding, I scoffed. You can't be serious. A guy 3 steps ahead looked back. This ain't no store opening, he called back. It's an autograph signing. That kicked up a murmur. All of a sudden the entire line was talking. There was some confusion about what we were actually doing out there. A lot of people were there for tickets, but for different artists. Some were there for a shop opening, an autograph signing, or a giveaway. A couple of phones were passed around and shown so we could compare emails. All emails were from different accounts, seemingly official enough to get past the spam filters. They all advertised different things, but they ended with the same line. Please be patient and understanding, and please wait in line. It became readily apparent that no one had the faintest idea what this opening actually was. A couple of folks just got up and left. Finally, the guy at the very front stepped out of line. I'm not sticking around for some scam, he spat. I'm going home. You should too. A couple more people packed up, but hadn't decided what to do. I was a bit on the fence about it, but as I watched that first man round the corner, I figured there'd be some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe they were doing several promotions at once. I heard his voice. He sounded surprised and a little angry. What is this? Then he screamed, a blood-curdling, ear-bleeding scream. It got quiet. Everyone looked at one another, trying to find an answer to what was going on. I got out of my chair to get a better look, but Rodney put his hand on my arm. Hold on, he said, lowering his voice. Don't go. We should call someone. He agreed, but we could see other people were already calling for help. The man from the front of the line never returned. There was someone in the back who called for help. A few people walked down the road to see if everyone was okay, but they never returned either. A patrol vehicle came by about 20 minutes later. 2 police officers walked up, asking questions. Everyone said the same thing. A man had stepped away, and it sounded like he got hurt. The officers did a sweep of the road, and when they came back around, they shrugged it off. There's nothing here, they said. You sure he didn't just call out to a friend? There were a lot of voices raised at that. But what could we say? It wasn't illegal to step out of line and not come back. There was no blood, or sign of a struggle. Maybe we hadn't heard what we thought we heard, but people were raising other issues. Like the emails we'd been sent. It all seemed like a plot to trick us. That, the officers had something to say about. No, it's legit, one said. We were informed that there'd be people waiting in line for some kind of event. They had no idea what the promotion was for, though, and even if they did, they couldn't disclose it. It was all arranged by an event promoter, who'd in turn been hired by someone else. All in all, there was nothing they could do but wish us the best of luck and be on their way. As they left, I noticed them meeting up with someone walking their dog at the end of the street. They shook hands, looked at us, and went their separate ways. Rodney and I stayed up late. We decided we'd take turns sleeping just to make sure no one took our things. I took the first shift. The line had whittled down to about 30 people by then. There'd been a lot of people trickling out after the uncertainty of what this was supposed to be. Of course, none of them came back. I didn't hear anything else, but there was this rising unease that there was something inherently dangerous about stepping away. I could hear a couple of people talking about it. That is, until a woman further back had enough. She'd been sitting quietly for a while, listening to people talk over her. It's not a big deal, she groaned. Look, I'll walk 1 lap around the building. I'll leave my purse here so you know I'll be back. All right? Maybe she was tired or frustrated. Maybe she wanted to prove a point. She stepped out of line and rounded the corner with a huff. Judging by the size of the building, it ought to take her a couple of minutes at a brisk walking speed. But as those minutes dragged on into half an hour, it was clear she wasn't coming back. She'd left everything behind, so it was clear this wasn't voluntary. Something had kept her from coming back. No one would willingly leave behind their identification, credit cards, or phone. A couple of people discussed leaving as a group. Someone mentioned leaving while being on a phone call to report back as they went, but no one wanted to take the risk. We didn't know what was going on, and no one was eager to put themselves on the line. Instead, we waited, speculated, and murmured back and forth about what might be going on. Was it a trafficking thing, gang-related? Or was this whole thing just a big misunderstanding? I woke up Rodney around midnight and leaned back in my chair. I told him about the woman leaving her things behind, and I could see something settle on his brow. It was a strange position to be in. We were either completely fine or in incredible danger. But which was it? Which made more sense? I had a nervous sleep. No dreams, just a stream of thoughts. I kept waking up for the dumbest reasons. A car playing loud music a couple streets down, a barking dog, someone throwing away a bunch of glass bottles, just everyday city noise. Rodney had slumped against the wall chewing on some licorice. When he noticed me watching, he pointed down the street. They keep coming back around. Who? I asked. Not sure. Some guy walking his dog every 30 minutes or so. The same guy? I don't know. Maybe. We kept our eyes on the street, and just like he said, a man with a dog passed by. He was wearing a large coat and a baseball cap, and the dog was one of the larger breeds, possibly a Saint Bernard or some kind of sheepdog. Every 30 minutes, Rodney reiterated. I don't think he's walking his dog. So what's he doing then? Rodney shook his head and took another bite of licorice. Patrolling. It was the middle of the night when the police came back. 2 officers, same as before, walked down the line with an audible sigh. Someone called again, they said. What's going on? A young man got up and pointed at the woman who'd left her things behind. The police scooped it up, checked it, and promised to take it back to the station. As they were about to leave, the young man asked if they could escort him to his car. They agreed. As he left, he looked back at the rest of us, holding up his phone. A woman he'd been sitting next to held up her phone in response. I'll stay on the line till I get home, he called out. I'll keep you updated. It seemed to go well enough, but as they rounded the corner at the end of the street, I noticed one of the officers looking to the left and raising his hand, as if waving at someone just off to the side. We all looked at the woman with the phone. She was hunched over, cradling it with both hands, listening through wireless earpieces. She'd say something occasionally, like a quiet, "Yes, I'm still here," or "Are you okay?" Then, after a couple of minutes, her eyes went wide. "Hello?" she said. "Dan? Dan, are you there?" There was no response. I could see the tears pool in her eyes as her hand started to shake. He'd promised to stay on the line. Something must have gone wrong. "They're picking us off," muttered Rodney. "Someone is picking us off." "But why?" I whispered back. "What's the point?" "Think about it," he said. "This whole block is basically shut down. Roadwork, maintenance, fumigation, renovations. It's just us out here." "But why us? Why now?" "There's gotta be a reason." Everyone was awake by then. We tried to figure out if we all had something in common. We all looked different, and we were all different ages. We were there for different reasons, and we lived in different parts of town. There was nothing readily apparent that we had in common. Dan works at a bottling plant, the woman with the phone added. I'm in retail. Others joined in. One was an airline pilot, another was a bodyguard, a firefighter, a translator. All very different people in very different lines of work. However, we had one thing in common. We all had access to something. Rodney had access to pretty much whatever at the hospital. The woman working retail had access to influential private clients. The firefighter had control over who had what shift, and who would respond to what call. The translator could listen in on privileged information. I was no different. I was about to become shift manager at the plant. I could choose what and who went where and when. Is that it? Rodney said. Is that what we're here for? But what's the point of taking us out? I asked. This isn't hurting anyone but us. The man walking his dog was back for another round, but now it looked like he'd slowed down a bit. As Rodney talked, I saw him stop at the end of the street, giving us a long look, and his dog looked too. Somewhere around 3 a.m., a whole group of people got up from the back of the line. The idea was clear. They were going to rush out of there. Others protested, saying they could call people over to come help. If we all call someone, we can make a crowd. A man called out. We can leave as a crowd, and we'll be fine. No, we have to spread out, someone else said. We go different ways and we go fast. Some of us are bound to get out. Rodney got up too, but his voice drowned in the crowd. Things were getting heated, and people were pushing one another. Angry fingers were being pointed. Phrases were repeated over and over and over. The argument was quickly turning into a shouting contest. There's at least 8 people patrolling, Rodney tried to say. I've counted. There's at least 8. At least 8. But no one listened. And as push came to shove, a group from the back of the line spread out and ran into the night. Rodney slouched back down against the wall, breathing heavily. We all held our breaths, listening. We could hear footsteps running down different alleyways. It started with a crash, like someone taking a tumble into a trash container. Then one pair of footsteps stopped. Not long after, another stopped, and from a far-off corner I heard this barking, a loud, growling bark. No, someone pleaded. No, no, no. There was no screaming, no gunshots. All the sounds just stopped, and no one came back. A guy from the back of the line called out to them, but got no answer. We were down to about 20 people. Some were calling home, others were calling the police. But they weren't about to come back here for a third time. One called a taxi, but they couldn't find a place to park, so they had to stop at an adjacent street, which we couldn't get to. There was also this one woman with a face tattoo that asked to borrow a phone. Rodney handed over his. I'm getting my guys down here, she said. You'll see. I'm done. She made a call, shouting angrily for a couple of minutes. After the person on the other end finally seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, Rodney got his phone back. About 20 or so minutes later, 6 very tired men came wandering down the street. I could see the outline of holsters inside their cheap jackets. We're going, the tattooed woman called out. Y'all can come if you want. A couple of people got up. I looked at Rodney, but he shook his head. Suit yourself, she continued. We're leaving. We watched them walk away and round the corner. I heard them starting a car and putting it in gear. There was music playing, something loud with a thumping bass. It sounded like they were about to drive away when I heard a bark. But it wasn't just a bark. It was more like a growling cough. Then a gunshot. Then another. The sound bounced against the walls, ringing out over the city. I saw a couple of lights turn on in distant buildings. Then all was quiet again. No one wanted to go look. Some people screamed at nearby houses. hoping for someone to open a window and look our way. No one did. The line itself was in complete disarray by then. People were packing and unpacking, pacing back and forth, hoping some opportunity would show itself. I wasn't immune to it, but I tried to stay calm. Rodney helped a lot. He was a lot more calculated than I'd imagined when I first saw him. He counted the people walking by. He measured the dogs. He listened for repeating sounds. My mind was tired, but my heart kept my eyes open and frantic. "I don't get this one thing," I said. "There's a timeline." "What do you mean?" he asked. "They gave us a time this would open," I continued. "If they're just gonna keep us here until they've picked us off, why would they give us an endpoint?" "There's gotta be something to it," he said. "Some reason for this specific place and this time. And what happens when it opens?" We looked at one another. Whatever was going on, there couldn't be anything good in there. Rodney brought up the idea of breaking into the place we'd been lining up for. A couple of folks were on board, but the front gates were barred shut, and the personal entrance was on the back of the building. That kicked up all previous arguments about calling for help, or moving as a group, or running like panicked animals into the night. We tried to bend a piece of rebar into a makeshift crowbar, but we couldn't get it to work. The place was locked down hard, and we hadn't brought anything to break through. We couldn't do it. A couple of people thought about collecting jackets and making a line so we could pull them back if need be. The problem was, no one wanted to volunteer. "Nothing happens until we're out of sight," someone said. "As long as we're within view, nothing happens. So someone can go to the end of the street, look around the corner, and come back." We had a volunteer for that. A large guy in his early 40s. He brushed off our worries, grabbed his backpack, and went to the end of the street. We could see him the whole time as he called back to us. "There's a car here," he yelled. "The door's open. There's no one here." "Can you see anything?" Rodney called out. "Nothing," he said. "Not a soul." He turned to go back to us when he stopped. He looked to the side. There was a hint of doubt there. Rodney peered up at me, then back at the man. "I think the patrol's coming around," he said. "Any moment now." Suddenly the man started running back to us. By the time he reached us, 3 of us were up on their feet to catch him and slow him down. He was panting like he was having an episode. We looked back towards the street, where a person walking his dog had stopped to look at us. "That's no dog," the man wheezed. "I don't know what that is, but it's no dog." For a couple of seconds, we all just stared at the stranger. There really was something unusual about the dog. Its back legs had a curious shape, and there was a shine to the eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Almost blue. A couple more people would crack in the following hour. One just straight rushed down the road. Another tried to leave but was held back by the others. A couple tried to call people for help, or to have someone escort them to their car, but nothing came of it. One guy kept spamming the police over and over, yelling at the operator that if they were that upset with him, they were free to come down and arrest him at any time. By dawn, there were less than 20 of us still waiting in line. It was about 6 a.m. when I saw someone coming down the street, a woman with blue-colored hair and a neon green band shirt. I poked Rodney. We recognized her. She'd been the first one to leave, the one who went to get allergy medication. "She came back," I said. "You sure?" Rodney asked. "You sure that's her?" "Positive," I said. "Same clothes and everything." She waved at us. She was smiling and a bit bouncy, like she'd had a good night's sleep. In comparison, the rest of us were nervous wrecks. "I heard there was trouble," she said. "I'm sure it was a misunderstanding." "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing happened," she insisted. "Pills made me sleepy, so I went home. I just came to get my things, see what's going on. I wasn't buying it, and by the looks of Rodney, he wasn't either. Others didn't seem all that sure, but a couple seemed to relax their shoulders a bit. Despite my reservations, she got a lot of people up on their feet. Maybe they really wanted to believe that it was all just a big misunderstanding. And yeah, it was convincing. She'd come back after all, but maybe she was some kind of plant. Or maybe it was just someone who sort of looked like her. About half of all the people who remained joined her. They left together, giving the rest of us a tired wave goodbye. Some broke down in tears. There was this one woman whose face had burned into my mind. She was completely beside herself, shaking like a dry leaf in the wind. "I'm scared, okay?" she cried. "I'm scared. I don't understand what's going on. I just want to go home." She was assured and hugged and led by the hand, and slowly but surely they all wandered off down the streets, and none would return. About an hour later, there were less than 10 of us left. Rodney shook his head as he looked from side to side. "No patrols," he said. "They've missed it 2 times. "You think we can go?" I asked. "No," he said. "Something's up." He shook his head as we looked down the road, only to see someone approaching. It was one of the people who'd been walking their dog, except now they weren't just passing by, they were stopping at the end of the street. A couple more joined, blocking off the other exits. One by one they bent down and let their dogs off their leash. I looked at Rodney. For the first time he looked scared. I could see his chest rising and falling with little claustrophobic breaths. We were being closed in on from all sides. "They've fanned us out," he whispered. "They outnumbered us." "What do we do?" I whispered back. He got up and I followed. Others were taking notice as well, but as we began to spread out, we could see the approaching people moving to intercept. Then, the barking. I'll never forget the moment the dogs stepped out of the shade of the surrounding buildings. They looked almost completely black in the shadows, but they remained equally black when they stepped into the morning light. They had this ink-black, slick skin. Their back feet looked like something from a bird, and the entire body was hunched over on all fours. It was more humanoid than I'd thought, and as they got closer, they stretched out. The smaller of them, at full length, was at least 6'7". One of them looked my way with a shark-like grin, scratching the pavement like an eager dog with long, pointed claws. I looked back at Rodney a final time, and in a split-second realization, all hell broke loose. Someone made a run for it, only to be tackled to the ground. One of the dogs got them by the neck and bit down hard with a sickening snap. One guy tried to climb a light post, hoping he could get up to a window of a nearby building. 2 more creatures tore down the light post, breaking it with a snap as he came tumbling to the ground. They were picking us off one by one, killing us, feeding on us. A couple had time to scream for help, but the creatures targeted whoever made noise first. The 40-something-year-old man who'd gone out of the streets earlier was tackled face first into the pavement and had those razor-sharp teeth dug into the back of his neck. My mouth tasted salt as morbid death smells crept up my nose. We didn't stand a chance. There were at least 12 of them, and they knew what they were doing. Rodney and I stayed by the wall, trying to make ourselves as small as possible. I got a good look at some of the dog walkers. A couple of them were complete strangers, but a couple of them I recognized from earlier. They'd been in line just like me and Rodney. Maybe they'd been plants, or something else entirely. The creatures were feasting. One of the handlers went up to the locked building and rolled it open as one of them walked up to me and Rodney. He looked us up and down as one of the creatures settled down by his side. snarling and drooling, starved and ready to pounce. The man adjusted his glasses, peering out from under his baseball cap. "We got any hatchers left?" he called out. The building opened. I couldn't see what was inside from my angle, being pushed up against the wall. "All done," someone responded. "Got them all." The man looked at me and Rodney, was maybe 30 years old, with a fashionable beard. Simple square glasses. I couldn't have picked him out of a crowd. He looked down at the dark creature and adjusted his nondescript baseball cap. "Which one you want?" he asked. "Which did you dream of?" I felt something to my right. Rodney reached out and grabbed my hand, not because we were making a break for it, or to try some last-minute master plan. He was just scared. And when you're scared, you want to hold someone's hand, so he held mine. The creature looked us over, a hint of blue reflected at us from its deep eyes. We fumbled for the right words to say. Some plea, some brilliant last-minute monologue, something to appeal to their sense of kindness and humanity. But the stranger with the glasses didn't move a muscle. He might as well have been shopping for groceries. And with that, the creature growled. It had decided. It pounced on Rodney. I held his hand for as long as I could. I didn't look. I remember the sensation of screaming, but I don't remember the sound. My throat turned raw. The muscles in Rodney's hand tightened, then fell limp. The man with the glasses took a step forward, shushing the creature. There, he said. "It's okay. Dream well. Eat." Bone crunching, sinew snapping, meat and the smell of hot iron. I closed my eyes so hard my skull ached. There was noise all around me. I didn't hear most of it, as I could barely make out anything over the sound of my own heart. There was biting and ripping, interlaced with the most casual-sounding conversation. "You got the shells?" someone asked. "No need. We're torching." "You sure?" "It's clear. We got a firefighter." I looked up. A couple creatures began to look different as they ate. Some had brighter skin. Some were shorter, fatter. I heard clattering as their claws fell off their fingers, bones snapping as their legs straightened. Then the man with the glasses clapped his hands at me. "Hey," he said. "You can go." "What?" "You can go," he repeated. "We're done." I got up off the ground and cleared my eyes. A couple of people looked my way, and I could tell they weren't entirely convinced. Some were armed. I recognized one of them as the woman with the face tattoo. "You're letting me go?" "Sure," he said. "We got a full brood. We don't need you." "You can't kill people and walk away," I whispered. You can't do that." He shrugged at me like I'd asked him what the time was. I stepped back and no one followed me. I glanced at the creature gnawing on Rodney, only to see that it had started to gain his features, his face, his gangly arms. And all the while, the man with the glasses calmly shushed it and stroked its back. The others were setting fire to the building, using a can of gasoline and a strip of newspaper. I only saw a brief glance of the inside. Black rock-like fragments littered the floor. Strange organic formations stuck to the wall in batches of 3 to 6. When he noticed I wasn't leaving, the man with the glasses casually waved a pistol at me. Not to shoot me, but to show that he had it. "Go on now," he said. And as the fire flared up, I stepped around the corner and I didn't return. I came home in tears. I remember breaking down in the hallway, trying to explain everything all at once to my girlfriend. I told her about the tickets, and the plans I'd made, and the people I'd met, and the dogs and the handlers. All of it. I tried to show her Rodney's socials, and as I did, I noticed he was posting. My heart skipped a beat. Long night, the post said. It was just a selfie posted 10 minutes earlier. He looked fine, healthy even, but there was a little blue tint to his eyes that wasn't there before. No people went missing that night. Everyone came home eventually, and from what I've heard, there haven't been any incidents. Everything just keeps going like normal, like nothing happened. So who can I call? What can I even say? You can't report a person not being properly killed to the police. I even texted Rodney once and he responded like it was no big deal. I just went home, he said. I'm fine. We should hang out sometime. I haven't agreed to it. I don't think I can. I don't even know what to think anymore. About a week or so after all this went down, I got a card. An apology card with a sad blue sunflower on the front. Inside was a handwritten note. Sorry for the inconvenience, it read. There were 2 tickets to the concert, backstage passes. I ended up going. I proposed. I think I recognized a couple of people in the crowd, but I'm not sure. Now, years down the line, it all feels like a nightmare. I can't point to a single thing and say, hey, look, it really happened. There are no witnesses, and in the eyes of the law, no crime has been committed. But I know what I lived through that night. That'll stay with me forever. And I know this was violent and ugly and sick. But that email asked me to wait patiently. And maybe that's what saved my life in the end. Maybe I'm still waiting. But for what? Three years ago, my friend group decided to go on a camping trip. Not just going to an RV park and chilling kind of camping, but a proper tent and campfire trip. See, I'm a chronic glamper. If given the choice between roughing it out in the wild and chilling in an air-conditioned RV, I'm picking the RV every time. I enjoy my creature comforts, and I always have. Jake, one of the guys that runs in our little group, prides himself on being a true outdoorsman, as our group usually ends up taking trips to nearby lakes and national parks. It's become a bit of a strain between the two of us. It'd be one thing if he could respect that I'm not here to have the authentic experience and just want to have fun, but he can't. He needles and mutters about how they could be going to cooler places if only we didn't have to always glamp to get out of the damn house. I think that's why I accepted his trip proposal. Normally I'd shut it down without question, but he'd been getting on my nerves for years. I accepted, thinking I'd proven once and for all that I can do it the rough and tough way. Maybe then he'd leave me the hell alone. Jake planned out a trip for us and our other 2 friends to a nearby lake on his family's property. When we arrived, I tried to ask where exactly in there we were going, but he'd just smirk. Relax, Maddie. The trail's marked. Even you won't get lost. Behind me, Chris and Luke, the other 2 coming with us, started up a conversation about s'mores and the supposed lake at the place we're going to. I felt my shoulders relax. Jake pulled out a compass and let us due north. According to him, we had to follow the compass a little ways until we found some trees he and his family had marked with red triangles. From there, you follow the path. The sun was going down by the time we spotted the first red triangle. I checked my phone, which said it was about 7:30. I also checked my signal. Nothing. The pack straps were digging into my shoulders, and Luke was huffing as he trudged behind Chris and me. Funny, despite the fact that Luke was obviously the least capable of us, it's still me that Jake liked to piss on. Jake, I called. He paused and turned to me, a familiar, irritated expression on his face. Can we pause for a minute? I gotta take a piss. I didn't mention that Luke looked ready to puke, but he seemed to see it anyway when he looked at him. Jake huffed. Don't get lost. I want to get to our site so we can get set up. I dropped my pack to the ground and started walking off the trail some. I could hear Luke wheezing behind me, obviously tired from the trek. The woods were quiet as I broke from the trail. I listened around for the birds or crickets, but it was dead silent. I glanced over my shoulder, making sure I was far enough away, and relieved myself. I zipped up and began to turn back when a branch cracked behind me. My head snapped back in the direction of the noise, but there was nothing. I turned and began walking again, and the crunching of leaves started behind me. I stopped, and so did the noise. It was my own footsteps. It had to be. But I started again, faster this time, and nearly broke into a run when the crunching just seemed to get louder and louder. I busted through the tree line, hitting the trail and whirling around to see what had been on my heels. Nothing. I stared out at the forest waiting. There wasn't even a rustle of leaves from the wind. Just silence. Matt, let's go, Chris called, breaking my staring contest with the empty trees. I turned and jogged up the trail to catch up with them. As I picked my pack up off the ground, I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Did you guys hear that?" They all turned around to look at me. "Hear what?" Luke answered. I couldn't quite bring myself to spit it out. After all, what had I heard? Leaves crunching when I walked? I shook my head. Jake continued to lead us towards the campsite, the red triangles leading us ever onwards. I looked at them closer as we passed. They were spray painted on, with each tree being marked on both sides, so that they could be seen no matter the direction you were coming from. Each marker was about 5 meters apart, and at any given time you could see the next few up ahead. The sun was nearly set when we broke through the spot by the lake. I had to hand it to the bastard. The sight was beautiful. The trees all stood in glorious formation, shades of green mottled with the golden light of the sunset. The water shined a slightly muddy blue-gray, peppered with the same golden light stretched through the trees. We each picked a spot to pitch our tents. Luke and I got put on the tent duty while Chris and Jake, our 2 more experienced outdoorsmen, went out to get some good sticks and firewood. As I finished getting my tent up, I glanced over at Luke. He was struggling to get the stakes in the ground. I sighed, turning to help. We got his tent pitched and together worked to get the other 2 up. As we were finishing up with Chris's tent, the other 2 came back. I could see Jake looking over his tent, probably ready to find something to criticize me on. I was proud when he couldn't find anything. Chris and Jake threw some of the wood into the spot we designated as our fire pit, putting the rest of it close by for later use. They got the fire started, and we all idly chatted as the sun sank between the hills. Luke got up and brought his backpack over. As he unzipped the pack and reached in, I smiled. Hershey's chocolate bars, a box of graham crackers, giant fluffy marshmallows. I glanced over and saw my grin mirrored on Chris's face. Jake rolled his eyes, but obligingly got up to grab some sticks to roast the marshmallows on. We gorged ourselves on granola bars and s'mores as the world around us turned dark. "Hey Matt," Chris started. I looked at him, mouth and hands sticky with melted sugar. "Earlier today when you ran off to take a piss, what was that all about?" I looked at him puzzled. "You ran out there like a bat out of hell, and then you were all, did you guys hear that?" He pitched his voice up and my eye twitched. He grinned goofily at me. I didn't quite know what to say. I didn't want to scare Luke, who was looking a bit nervous, and I still wasn't convinced I hadn't made the whole thing up. I thought I heard something behind me. I settled on. Branch snapped kinda loud and it freaked me out. Jake snorted. "Really? All that fuss over a branch cracking?" In the woods? Yeah, I know. That's why I dropped it. It wasn't much. Chris and Luke exchanged a look, seeming to sense that wasn't quite it. But Jake was snickering at my foolishness, and neither quite seemed like they wanted to press. We all went to bed after putting the fire out. I tossed and turned some, but overall the night passed on without incident. In the morning, we all woke up to the sound of Jake hollering that if we wanted to fish, now was the time before it got too hot. The lake was a blast. We sat around fishing for a while, chatting as the sun rose up in the sky. The fish were particularly hesitant to bite, but as Chris launched into a story, I found myself having a good time anyways. We scrambled some eggs we'd brought along in Jake's fancy cooler over the fire when we got too hungry. I considered asking him if bringing food in was cheating, but it wasn't worth the fight. At about noon, we started swimming. The water was nice and warm from the summer heat, and I spent a good chunk of time just floating and soaking up the sun. That, of course, was ruined when Luke snuck up on me underwater and grabbed me around the gut, flipping me over and giving me a nose full of lake water. We splashed around for a good long while. The thing that drove us back to the shore was our crumbling stomachs. Luke and I were chatting excitedly about finding some good sticks for roasting the hot dogs we'd brought along when I ran straight into Chris's back. Whoa, Chris. Dude, what's... I paused. Chris and Jake were just staring towards our campsite. I followed their gaze. Plastic littered the ground. All the meat we had brought with us had been torn out of its packages and was gone, leaving only the wrappers behind. Luke's tent, which had the marshmallows and chocolate, had its flap shredded. The flap was still zipped up closed, but the middle was gaping like an open wound. My blood ran cold. Luke had caught up and was looking as nervous as me. Even Jake looked shaken. I mean, we are in bear territory. I tried to reason. Guess we should have locked down the food a bit better. Jake looked pissed. You think I didn't plan for that? No bear is getting into these containers. I don't even know why they would. The meat's all packaged. They say bears are pretty smart. Maybe they... Luke tried. That cooler had a lock on it. No bear could undo. It'd have to bust the damn thing open. Silence weighed heavily on us as we looked at the cooler. The nice, shiny, pristine cooler. Maybe we should head back. I mean, we don't have any food left. Luke suggested nervously. I looked up at the sky. The sun was still relatively high, but it was rapidly sinking down. It'd be dark by the time we made it back to our cars. Then I looked over at Luke's tent. I stared at the shredded door, the carefully opened backpack. What was worse? Risking getting lost in the woods or risking staying? That wasn't a real choice, and I knew it. Let's get our stuff packed up and let's go. We have our heavy-duty flashlights, I said. Chris and Luke didn't need any convincing. They hustled to get their tents taken down and their stuff ready. Jake looked hesitant. I don't think leaving now is a good idea. It's... He checked his watch. Already 5:30. By the time we get back... It'll be dark, I know. I agreed. But it's either that or staying here for another night. He huffed and started getting his stuff together. My tent came down easy enough, and I had all my stuff packed quick. When I shrugged on my pack and turned to the other guys, I could see Jake stomping out the fire embers and grabbing his compass. Everyone got their lights? He said, bad mood evident. Chris and Luke nodded, although Luke looked vaguely ill at the thought of navigating by flashlight. I wasn't faring much better. We all started back the way we came in. Jake took the lead, following the trail markers. Luke followed close behind him. Chris and I took up the rear, keeping pace beside one another. You think it was a bear? He asked. I shrugged. Don't know. Never actually had an encounter with one. I have, he said. Dad and I went camping when I was a kid. Family next to us on the grounds didn't properly store up their trash. You saw it? Sure did. Black bear. Ugly thing. Spawned a whole lecture from my dad about how to properly store food and trash so you don't attract them. He paused. Not gonna lie to you, Matt. I don't think this was a bear. I waited for him to elaborate, but he just looked at the cooler Jake was carrying. We followed all the safety precautions. Not just that. We were pretty close to the shore, splashing and running around. Just lots of noise. Bears don't like noise. Jake, what way do we go? Luke called, interrupting our silent musing. I looked up from my feet, confused. The spray-painted red triangle was visible on the tree ahead of us. Jake paused. What way do we... He glanced around. I took the opportunity to do the same. Luke was practically bouncing from foot to foot on his eagerness to go. Where's the other path go off to? Another part of the lake? He asked, giving a nervous laugh. Jake wasn't laughing, though. In fact, he was turning an alarming shade of white. I could feel his sudden fear radiating off of him. I was starting to match it. Beyond the tree with our marker, I could distinctly see two paths marked in the same fashion. One veered off slightly to the left, and the other veered off slightly to the right. The marker was dead center. We'd have to choose a path. Jake, which one goes to our cars? I asked. It was a testament to see how stunned he was that he didn't tear me a new one over for questioning him. There'd only been one path coming up, and it was straight as an arrow. We haven't even taken a little sidestep, had just marched straight through the woods. Neither of these paths went straight forward like we had when we came up. So what was this? A whole new split, complete with a line of markers for a path that wouldn't take us back to our cars? Jake, you and your family put these markers up, right? Which way do we go? I asked, urgency creeping into my voice. I don't know, he said, his voice cracking. We never really went out from the path. We definitely didn't mark a new path, and we wouldn't mark with the same damn markers. I looked up again. The sun had crept further down, painting the sky with a faint shade of orange. We were getting closer and closer to sunset. Jake, are you sure we're going the right way? Chris asked. I turned to see him and Luke huddled together behind us. Yes, we go right. Ignore the markers on the left. We go right. How do we know, though? I mean, those aren't the same markers we followed, right? There was only one path coming up. Chris nervously asked. Jake let out a frustrated huff. He slung his pack to the ground and walked over to a tree with some low-hanging branches. I'll come up here and find the clearing we parked near. That way, we can ignore the markers and go to the road. Happy? He snarled before grabbing the branch and beginning to climb. We watched him climb till about halfway up when the leaves began to obscure him. I could hear the branches rustling as he continued his climb. Well? Chris hollered. I see the road, Jake yelled back. We all let out a sigh of relief. This whole trip has been a bit of a nightmare, I commented. Chris and Luke both nodded. I waited to hear the crackling of the branches as Jake climbed down. They never came. We waited there at the bottom for what felt like an eternity. Jake, buddy, you coming down from there? Chris called. No answer. I frowned, trying to see through the thick canopy. Suddenly I heard the sound of something hurtling through the branches. The crashing was fast, a free fall as whatever it was collided with everything in its path. I jumped back in time to avoid being knocked over the head with whatever it was that had fallen. I looked down. A hiking boot lay sideways on the ground, its ties unlaced. I looked back up into the canopy. The wind blew a little harder, shuffling the leaves just enough for me to see higher up the tree. Jake was gone. I blinked once, twice before turning back to the others. Chris and Luke both were staring at the shoe. Luke had Chris's arm in a vice grip, his breathing beginning to speed up in a telltale sign of panic. Chris looked back up. "Jake, where the hell are you? This ain't funny." Still silent. We waited 5 minutes, then 10. The only noise around us was the wind rustling through the leaves and the sound of Luke getting more and more antsy. When 15 had passed, I turned to Chris. "Left or right?" He looked at me startled. "What path? Left or right?" "Dude, what are you talking about? We can't leave Jake." "Jake's gone. I don't know how or why he seems to think it's funny to leave us here, scaring us half to death." I took a deep breath. "We gotta get back to our cars. Leave his pack there. When he wants to stop scaring the crap out of us, he can catch up." Chris paused for a long, tense moment before sighing. "Yeah, okay." He looked over at the 2 paths in front of us. "Look down the left and see if it looks familiar. I'll look down the right." I nodded and walked towards the left path. Chris and Luke began towards the right, looking down it to try and find some indication that was the right path. I walked to the first marker on the left. I couldn't understand why there were suddenly 2 paths. It didn't make any... I stilled. In front of me, a line of wet red had dripped down from the triangle. I watched it gleam, wet, in the setting sun. This marker was new, and now that I was closer to it, I could smell the tang of copper. My heart seized in my chest as I quickly cut across the paths to Chris and Luke, who were discussing their trail. They turned to me as I approached. "I think this might be it. Both sides of the tree are marked the same way it was when we..." "It's this one, the other." I sucked in a ragged breath. "The other one's fresh." "Fresh? The hell you mean?" Chris started. I cut him off. It wasn't paint. "The red is wet. It's fresh." "Someone painted a new path with the same marker? That's so messed up. Why the hell would..." "Chris, it's not paint." Luke, who had been watching the exchange, cut in. "What do you mean it's not paint? What else would it..." I could see the moment it clicked for him. Chris, too, tensed in realization. "Is this some kind of joke? You and Jake?" he asked, voice dangerously low. I whirled on him, almost hissing in rage. "You think I'd plan something like this? With him, of all people? The guy can't even look at me without a comment on how crap I am at everything. The only reason he even lowered himself enough to pass me an invite is because he knew the 2 of you would want me to come along. And you think of what? Plan some scary haunted trail?" Even as I said it, I knew he didn't. Neither of them did. They both just wanted some rational explanation for all of this. I pushed past Chris to check the trail marker. I got close and checked it. My heart about stopped. It was wet. I turned back towards the clearing we were in before, charging across towards the markers we had been following. Wet, wet, wet. All tinged with a coppery smell we'd been marching by too quickly to notice. I turned back towards Chris and Luke, and saw Chris was right behind me. "They're all wet?" he asked, wrinkling his nose as the smell hit him. We shared a glance, looking at the triangle nearest to us. "Now what?" I couldn't help but wonder. Here we were, in a rapidly darkening forest, lost without anyone who was even slightly familiar with the area. "I've got a compass in my pack," Chris answered. He set his pack on the ground and rummaged through it for a while before triumphantly pulling out the instrument. "Jake had his on him when he went up that tree, but I have my own." He pointed in a direction off to our right. "South is that way. We go that direction. We should get close to the road." As long as you and me and Luke stay close together, we'll be fine. I nodded and turned towards where Luke was. You hear that? We'll be fine. We just stick together and... Luke was gone. Nausea slammed into me, turning my limbs into goo. Chris wildly looked around, calling for Luke. I grabbed into his sleeve, terrified. Chris, I said, keeping my voice low. He stopped his frantic yelling and looked at me. Chris, we need to get to the road and get back to our cars. Matt, we can't just leave Luke here. Jake knows this place, but Luke? Chris, we get to the car and we go somewhere with signal and call the cops. They can come out here with dogs and search and rescue teams. But for right now, we have to go. I could see him internally fighting a battle, but in the end he nodded. I kept a hold of his sleeve as he led us south. The woods finally got dark enough that I grabbed the flashlight with my free hand. Chris went to grab his too, but I stopped him. I've got the light. You keep leading us straight. He didn't fight me. He just nodded and continued leading us. Finally, I could see something between the trees. The road. I could hear Chris give a little sigh of relief, and we both started walking a little faster. Where's the other path go off to? Another part of the lake? A voice called behind us. We stopped. Dread crawled up my spine as Luke's voice washed over me. Chris was about to turn and call when I let go of his arm and covered his mouth. He looked at me angry when the voice came again. Jake, what way do we go? I felt a whimper crawl up my throat. I met Chris's eyes and jerked my head in the direction of the road. He nodded. We crept forward, taking care to keep our steps as light as possible. Behind us, sounding like he was wandering the forest, Luke's voice continued. The nausea increased tenfold as I realized it was just repetitions of things he had said earlier. The road ahead of us was clearer than ever, and as if heaven itself was lighting the way, it was lit in a soft golden glow. Chris broke free of my grasp and ran forward. The crunching of leaves and sticks beneath him caused the voice to stop, and suddenly the sound of something barreling through the trees made its way to my ears. I sprinted after Chris, unwilling to turn and see what was behind us. We broke from the tree line scared to death. The noise behind us didn't slow down. Run across the road. Run, I called, not even slightly slowing. I vaguely noticed that the light seemed to be getting brighter, but I ignored it in favor of sprinting harder. Chris cleared the road, and I was right behind him. I heard an odd noise, almost like brakes squealing. I spun around in time to see something big behind us get thrown forward across the road as a car slammed into it. My jaw dropped as everything seemed to come to a stop. The car was dented on the hood, and its driver stumbled out, confused. I didn't hesitate. Neither did Chris. We ran up to her, urging her back into the car. I think she caught sight of what it was she hit, because she just faintly told us to get in the back. We clambered in as she put the car in reverse and turned the car around. She started the car back towards town, and I couldn't help but stare out the back window. As the driver took a turn and the thing was going out of view, I saw a twitch and begin to rise up. The driver's name was Eve, and she was trying to head home from a work trip in another city. She'd been passing through by happenstance, and was grilling us on what the hell that thing was. A deer, an elk, a moose. It's awful far down south for moose, but damn if that sucker wasn't big. I just asked her to drop us off at the police station. She looked back at us confused, but said that was fine. I closed my eyes. When we got there, we told them the whole story. They obviously had some questions, and I knew they didn't believe us on multiple parts. They told us not to leave town and that they'll have more questions for us later. They took us up in the morning to get our cars. When we got to the spot we'd parked, the cops just looked as baffled as Chris and I had felt this whole trip. Every window of all 4 cars was shattered. The tires were slashed with big, great gashes, and the trunks had been ripped open by force. Luke's car even had a door ripped off its hinges, the offending piece of metal bent out of shape a few yards away. The cops just took us home. They never found Jake or Luke. Chris and I still keep in touch every now and again. I think that trip put a strain on our friendship. Eve and I, meanwhile, we got a whole lot closer. So close, in fact, she's right here beside me as I type this. I don't know what's prompting me to recall this. Maybe some form of exposure therapy, or a way to get it off my chest. I'm not sure. All I know is that I'm never going camping again. When my daughter started drawing pictures of me dead, I thought it was just a phase. Kids are weird, right? The first drawing showed up on the fridge a few weeks ago. I was half awake, grabbing some coffee, when I noticed a new crayon sketch next to her usual stick figure family doodles. But this one was different. The bright reds, yellows, and blues were gone, replaced by thick, messy black lines. It showed a stick figure with a crooked smile, labeled Daddy, impaled on a giant spike. Blood, or the crayon version of it, gushed from the top of my head in heavy red streaks. I just stood there, not sure how to feel. Jenny walked in, dragging her stuffed bunny, and climbed up on the kitchen stool. "Hey, sweetie," I said. "What's this one about?" She glanced at me, completely calm. "It's from my dream." "Your dream?" I laughed, a little uneasy. "That's intense." She just nodded and poured herself some cereal like nothing was wrong. I took the drawing and tossed it in the trash. That should have been the end of it. 2 days later, I found the second one under my pillow. This time, the daddy stick figure was being ripped apart by what looked like wild dogs' round mouths full of teeth, red, angry eyes, all snarling. Again, way too much red crayon. "Jenny," I said when she got home from school, "these drawings, they're starting to get kind of scary." She gave me a little wink. "He told me to draw them." "Who?" She shrugged. "Just the man in the walls." My skin crawled. I told myself it was just her imagination again. Maybe something she picked up from a cartoon or a spooky kid in her class. Still, I emailed her teacher, Mrs. Carter, just to be sure. She replied the next morning. "Jenny is a very imaginative child. Exceptionally talented, actually. Some kids just process the world differently. Yes, she talks a lot about her dreams, but they're only dreams. Let me know if you'd like any resources. Mrs. Carter." Only dreams. Right. A week later, something happened that I couldn't explain. I was out back chopping wood near the shed. One of the big branches, thick and old, suddenly broke loose above me. I heard it at the last second before it slammed into my shoulder. The pain was blinding, but I managed to crawl away. No major injuries. Just a bruised collarbone. I iced it and tried to shake it off. That night, Jenny left another drawing on the kitchen table. It showed me by the shed, crushed under a massive branch. Blood and all. But here's the part that made me stop cold. I was wearing the exact same hoodie as in the drawing. Same lettering, same boots. Even the same axe. "Jenny," I said, my voice shaking. "When did you draw this?" She looked up from her juice box. "Before school." "No, I mean before or after I got hurt today." "Before," she said, frowning a little. "But I guess I messed up. You didn't die." Then she skipped away, humming to herself, leaving me alone with the picture. I checked the trash where I'd thrown the old drawings. They were all still there. Too specific, too real, impossible to ignore now. I started keeping a record. She made a new drawing every night, sometimes two. Always of me, always dying. One where I was electrocuted in the bathtub, one where I jumped off the roof, one where a plastic bag was pulled over my head, my fingers clawing at it. They were getting more detailed, more real. Sometimes I'd wake at 3 a.m. and hear her crayons scratching from across the hall. I stopped sleeping. Then on Tuesday, I found a drawing that chilled me to the bone. It showed me laying in bed, eyes wide open, mouth agape, blood pouring from my ears. Above me, something massive and black, faceless but shaped like a person. Its body was made of lines like frozen TV static caught mid-buzz. At the top, in red crayon, tomorrow. That night, I locked my bedroom door, unplugged everything, slept with a flashlight and a baseball bat. Every creak in the walls made me jump. At 4:10 a.m., the baby monitor, which I hadn't used in months, crackled to life. No voices, just static. I unplugged it, but when I woke in the morning, the picture was gone. In its place, a new one. Same bed, same body, same blood. Caption, "You got lucky." I confronted her. I know she's only 6. I know she's just a child, but I was falling apart. "What is this, Jenny? Tell me the truth." She looked up, and for the first time, her eyes filled with tears. "He says I have to." "Who?" "The man in the wall. He talks on the radio. He tells me how you're going to die. He says if I don't draw it, then it really happens." I was shaking. "This isn't real. This is your imagination, sweetheart." "No," she whispered. "Mommy didn't believe me either." I froze. "What do you mean?" "She told me to stop drawing her. Said it was scary, so I stopped." Her voice dropped lower. "Then she died." I couldn't breathe. My wife, Evelyn, passed 6 months ago. Sudden aneurysm. No warning. Jenny had been home. She was the one who found her. I thought she'd blocked it out. Maybe she hadn't. Or maybe. I ran to the attic and pulled out her old sketchbooks, the ones we hadn't touched since the funeral. Buried deep between crayon scribbles was a single page. Mom lying in a hospital bed, bruised eyes, blood dripping from her nose, and behind her that same faceless, static man figure, dated 2 days before she died. That night, I tore every drawing off the walls, burned the sketchbooks in the fireplace. Jenny watched from the stairs, silent. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but he's still here." We're in a diner now, holed up at a corner table with 2 backpacks and nothing else. She's sleeping beside me, clutching her bunny. And I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. Maybe if someone reads it, they'll believe me. Maybe they'll find a way to stop it. The last drawing, it's still in the pocket of my coat. I haven't looked at it since we ran. I'm unfolding it now. It's not what I expected. It's me sitting at a table, writing. Jenny asleep beside me. And behind us, outside the window, is the static man. His face pressed against the glass, arms wide open, waiting. Written above in perfect red crayon letters. "You can't run." I didn't want to believe it, but that's when it hit me. I'm running from something I can't escape. I don't know what will happen next. I don't care. I'll keep running until whatever's coming finally catches me. No wonder you're upset. Your dad has been treating you like crap, came the text message after a few seconds of typing bubble. I physically jumped a little from my chair. Yes, finally. Finally someone who gets me. I felt heard when I was with Gorilla_123. Not only did he listen to my struggles, he made me feel okay about the hosh-posh of emotions inside me. He made me feel not broken. I'm sorry I'm always venting to you, I say, not being completely sincere in my apology. Don't you dare say sorry. What are friends for, after all? He replied. I sighed with relief. I could rely on Gorilla_123. After all, he had been hearing me vent non-stop for 3 months now. You see, my life is somewhat of a mess. My single dad treats me like a burden, even though all he does is drink all the time using my money. My job as a waitress is, well, soul-crushing. However you make sense of that. I don't really have a social life, and my only friend seems to be an internet Discord friend that goes by the name of Gorilla_123. Gorilla_123 has always been nice to me, which is why his next message made me freeze in my chair. You should die, came the message after the notification beep. Did he actually just say that? He can't. This has to be some sort of misunderstanding. He knows that, well, me being so emotional would cry at something like that. This has got to be a mistake. What do you mean? I ask. I mean, think about it. The world has been treating you like garbage. The world doesn't deserve you, he said. Ain't no way he actually meant it. Has he gone crazy out of nowhere? He had never said anything even remotely like that. Getting told I should die after being called a friend was not something I expected today, despite how usually crappy my days go. No, I replied. I can't see you upset like this. I can't see you being tortured every single day. It hurts me, he replied. And then he said something that made this whole situation more real than I ever realized. Look outside. I stared at the reply for a few moments, trying to understand what it means. He couldn't be asking me to actually look out my window or something. Could he? Well, I got up and glanced out the window into the dimly lit streets. Nothing. I sighed with relief. I was half expecting him to be standing there. Thank God he isn't. And then I noticed someone barely peeking from behind our car. A gorilla mask. Everything stopped for a moment as my heart struggled to continue working. The gorilla mask was pitch black with faintly glowing red eyes. I stood there unable to move or speak, looking at the masked man as he slowly revealed himself in full by coming out. I don't have any words to describe his build except he was a giant, and he held a knife that shined against the full moon. My throat felt dry as I stared at the man. Gorilla_123. How the hell does he know where I live? Did I say it by mistake? My dumb butt would probably do something like that. It took all the energy in my body to finally break out of the trance. I closed the curtain quickly, turned off the lights, and slid below my bed. If you feel like mocking the sheer stupidity of hiding under the bed, then I would just say that you clearly haven't been in a situation like this. My brain was paralyzed, and this was the best I could do. My last hope, it seemed. The door was kicked open with such a loud thud it made my heart jump. I struggled to keep my cries as quiet as possible. The man started humming as his footsteps echoed like thunder through the house. "Where are you?" He sung in a peaceful and sweet way. It made my stomach churn. I was going to die. Why did I even start venting to him? What was I thinking? I should have started repenting, I guess, but all I could think of was how dumb I am. The footsteps ran through the whole house. I hope my dad doesn't wake up. I hope he stays hidden, fallen on the floor behind the sofa after drinking more than he could handle. I know he sucks, but he has his own problems. He wasn't always like that. He was the most caring dad, always cheerful. And then Mom died. And who he was died with her, being replaced by an empty shell that just drinks and shouts. He is just grieving, though, isn't he? I hope he stays safe. Knock, knock, knock. The knocks on my door were so sudden and loud that I couldn't stop myself from bursting into tears. I shouted and cried, begging the man to leave me alone, begging him to let me live, shouting that I still had much to live for. Please go away, I screamed, my body slowly accepting the fact that I will die in a few minutes. And then, ding ding, a notification. The knocking stopped. I slowly slid out the bed, still whimpering, and walked to the screen. I was just messing with you. Get pranked. Anyways, I got you, friendo. Killed your dad for you. Now, no need to thank me. I'll go now. Gotta sleep.